Imagine the excitement in your child's eyes on their first day of school, and the pain when someone tells them they can't come in, not because they aren't smart, not because they didn't pass, but simply because of the color of their skin. Sebastian saw that injustice on his son's face and felt rage burn in his chest. But the principal who tried to deny his child's right to an education had no idea who she was dealing with. What started as an act of discrimination would end in a lesson she would never forget. Principal Elena Martinez had been in charge of San Ignacio Elementary School for over 20 years. Her reputation was impeccable, at least in the eyes of some. Others, however, knew her true nature, strict with some, lenient with others. Discriminatory, though she would never say it out loud. When Sebastian arrived at the school's entrance with his son Daniel, the boy was wearing his freshly pressed uniform and an eager smile. But the principal's expression changed the moment she saw them. Her gaze hardened, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Excuse me, sir," she eyed Sebastian up and down with a scrutinizing look. "I believe you've made a mistake. This school has very high academic standards, and we only accept students who truly meet our criteria." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "My son passed the entrance exam with an excellent score. I received confirmation of his enrollment." Elena crossed her arms and sighed, pretending discomfort. "Unfortunately, we've had to make some adjustments to the admissions list. There are limited spots, and we prioritize families who can contribute more to our educational community." Sebastian's heart hardened. He knew exactly what she was implying without her having to say it outright. He took a deep breath, glancing at his son, who was now gripping his backpack tightly, confused. "I see," Sebastian said, keeping his rage in check. "And is there any document explaining this sudden policy change?" Elena tilted her head with a condescending smile. "It's an internal decision. There's no need to go into details." Sebastian clenched his fists. His first instinct was to shout, to demand justice right then and there. But instead he smiled. A calm, dangerous smile. "All right," he said. "We'll be back later." He took Daniel's hand, and they walked away. The boy looked up at him with sad eyes, waiting for an explanation. "Dad, why won't they let me in?" Sebastian stroked his son's head and gave him a wink. "Don't worry, son. This isn't over." Sebastian spent the entire afternoon making phone calls. His voice was firm, his tone measured. He never raised his voice once, but every word he spoke carried weight. Meanwhile, Daniel watched from the living room, not fully understanding what his father was planning, but trusting him. The next morning, Sebastian put on his most formal suit and took his son back to school. This time, he wasn't alone. 3 city officials accompanied him, and behind them, a photographer from a local newspaper. Elena Martinez saw them from her office and frowned. She adjusted her blazer and stepped into the hallway, wearing her usual authoritative expression. "Mr. Sebastian, correct? I already explained yesterday that there are no available spots. I don't understand why you insist." Sebastian kept his serene smile as he gestured with his hand. One of the officials handed her a document. "Principal Martinez, this is a formal request from the City Council to review the school's admission process. It seems there have been some irregularities." Elena took it with trembling fingers, flipping through the pages quickly. This is ridiculous. As I told you, admission decisions are internal. And as I'm telling you," Sebastian interrupted, "a public institution cannot arbitrarily discriminate against a child." Elena felt her face heat up. She looked at the officials, the photographer, the parents now gathering curiously. She felt cornered. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can find a solution without making a spectacle." Sebastian nodded. "The only solution I'll accept is my son entering his classroom today, like any other child." Elena swallowed hard. She looked at Daniel, who was slightly hiding behind his father. Of course, we can make an exception." "I don't want exceptions," Sebastian corrected. "I want justice." Silence filled the hallway. Parents whispered among themselves. The officials waited. Principal Martinez felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Of course," she finally murmured. "The child can start today." Sebastian smiled and looked at his son. "Go ahead, son. It's time for your first day of school." Daniel smiled timidly and walked into the school. Principal Martinez lowered her gaze, feeling, for the first time in years, that her power was crumbling. The days passed, but Elena Martinez couldn't shake off the humiliation. Sebastián had exposed her publicly, and though she tried to maintain her authority within the school, something had changed. Parents whispered behind her back. Teachers looked at her with discomfort, and even some school board members seemed distant. But the worst part was Daniel's gaze every time he saw her, a mix of innocence and determination, as if he knew she had tried to deny him his right to study there. Despite her frustration, Elena couldn't act against him, at least not directly. But that didn't mean she couldn't make things difficult. She subtly instructed some teachers to be stricter with the boy, just enough to discourage him. She made sure he wasn't chosen to represent the school in important activities and avoided any public recognition of his achievements. If she couldn't remove him, she could at least make him feel like he didn't belong. But Daniel was stronger than she had imagined. Sebastián had taught him never to give up, and despite the injustices, the boy kept pushing forward. His performance was impeccable, his attitude respectful. He never complained, but at home, he told his father what was happening. Sebastián listened patiently, without showing anger. Yet, until one day, Daniel came home with tears in his eyes. "Dad, the principal told me I can't participate in the speech competition because I don't have the right profile." That was the breaking point. That very night, Sebastián made one last call. The next morning, a team of inspectors from the Ministry of Education arrived at the school. They reviewed documents, interviewed teachers, spoke with students and parents. What they uncovered was worse than they had imagined. Manipulated admission records, discrimination in scholarship allocation, complaints filed away without response. When Elena Martinez was called into the office, her face was pale. In front of her sat the inspectors, some parents, and Sebastián. "Principal Martinez," said the head inspector in a grave tone, "we have found serious irregularities in your administration. You are accused of discrimination, abuse of authority, and administrative negligence." "This is a personal attack," she tried to defend herself. "It's a conspiracy led by this man." Sebastián crossed his arms, calm. "I'm not the one who spoke out, Principal. It was your own teachers, your own students, your own records." Elena felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Days later, the news of her dismissal appeared in every local media outlet. The community celebrated her departure. The teachers breathed a sigh of relief. And for the first time in years, the school felt renewed. And Daniel, with a big smile, stepped onto the stage on the day of the speech competition, ready to show the world what he was capable of. If you like this video, you have to watch this one where a racist teacher forces a black student to solve a difficult equation without knowing he was a genius. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like.